Hey everybody, welcome to another Primetime Funk mod. I'm here tonight to talk about the Gameboy macro, specifically the type of Gameboy macro that you can make out of a DS Lite bottom screen. Now, I haven't had any DS Lites that were in need of resuscitation in this particular fashion, so I hadn't built one before, and I hadn't really sought it out, but I was sent something as a gift recently, just to take a look at it and give some feedback, and it was this. So this is a Gameboy macro faceplate. So it's modeled on the original pretty well, except for you don't have to deal with any awkward like cutting and trying to fill in and use pieces that aren't of any more use to you at all anyways. So in this particular case, I went ahead because he told me that this was going to be coming my way. I ordered a couple of things more. I ordered a clear shell from AliExpress, and I ordered a board, because you can actually just get DS Lite PCBs from AliExpress, which is pretty cool. So we were in need of a couple other parts as well, so I ordered those ahead of time. So a 330 ohm resistor, and I ended up getting a massive roll of them. That was the only way I could purchase them. They're just the tiniest little things. They're adorable. I don't know if I'm ever going to need a 330 ohm resistor again in my life, but I guess I have them. I ordered a new screen for it. So this is the bottom screen for a DS Lite. So not to be confused with some other macros that actually use the bottom screen from a DSi or a regular DS. There are different versions of, but this is the one that does with the DS Lite. Now, I'm not going to make you go through the pain and suffering that I did to actually get these buttons put together, because the triggers that are built into the DS Lite are very finicky and have to be put together a very particular way. So I'm not going to be messing with those a lot, but I'm gonna go through this mod and kind of show you how to put it all together. Now, Chris, the gentleman who sent me this from Retro Gamers Store, told me that he's also going to be including this. So he let me know what other parts were going to be necessary. So I got the screen, I got the PCB, I got the resistor, and I also got, this is actually a speaker for a PSP 2000. So he sent me the link for the proper model, and he's actually going to be providing that to people on his website. He and I were talking, and I was like, that's probably going to be one of the only really like rare items that nobody's going to have already in their household. So he's actually going to be making it available from the website for people who are ordering the front shell. Now this is a prototype, so it's got a couple of little imperfections and stuff like that, but honestly, as proof of concept, it's pretty awesome. And I've already gotten used to carrying this around as my go-to, because it's so lightweight to play my GBA games, and the authentic screen with like the retro pixel effect on this one just looks really nice. So it's actually the exact same pixel count as the GBA, but because these screens, the DS Lite and the DSi, they came out later, they've got a tighter pixel count, so it's still actually is the authentic pixel count that originally belonged with the game. So you're still seeing it as Nintendo intended it. So I kept some things together because I've actually done this mod, obviously. There are a few things that seemed silly that were originally a little bit of a chore to solder, that I didn't think it made any sense to desolder them just to show off here, but I'm going to show you how it's done. And then, hopefully this actually helps you decide if you want to actually do this mod yourself. So the first thing, we got the PCB. Now, traditionally, I tend to try and get the soldering all out of the way early, because the soldering tends to be some of the more challenging. Now, on this particular mod, you have to actually, because of the way the DS Lite is made, you have to fool the DS Lite into thinking that the front screen, or the top screen, more accurately, is still there and is turning on, because it goes through a series of checks when it's turning on, and if it doesn't sense the top screen turning on, it doesn't turn on the bottom screen. So here's a couple of things that I'm going to show you. I'm not going to, like I said, desolder them because that would be silly, but I am going to zoom in and let you get an idea of what I am talking about. Now, there are two separate things here. You can see that little guy, and I'm going to show you. So this is my 330 ohm resistor. So essentially what I had to do is on these 2 points here, I had to add some solder, and then I just set the resistor in between, and I just kind of dragged the solder over onto the edges to connect them. It was a little bit challenging because it's a pretty tiny little dude, and making sure that I was like as magnified as I am right now, going up to see, but that is where your resistor belongs. So you're going to be through those 2 points, and it's like LED. Yeah, it's the 2 LED points there. I'll actually provide a little bit more on that. Now the other thing that I did here that gave me a noticeable boost in sound is something that I actually found off of Reddit. If you solder the 2 sound points together, like SPR0 and SPL0, so that's your left and right audio, you actually get a boost because since it's going just through one speaker, it converts it into mono and makes it a lot crisper and clearer since it's coming out of just one specific speaker. So I would highly recommend getting those soldering jobs out of the way to start with. A little intimidating to some. If you haven't done a lot of soldering yet, just take your time, and then go back to your soldering basics and make sure that you're doing some solid connections. The resistor I did get on the first try, but you wouldn't have to feel too bad if it didn't go. And then this one, you're just soldering the left and right audio points together. Now, this brings us to, I'm going to pull back out a little bit here. Now, the next step that you're going to want to do, the cool part with this is that there's really only one ribbon that you need to connect. So you've got a fairly simple ribbon connector. You pop back the little black lever, you put it in, and then you flip it over. Now, I know this screen works already, so I don't really need to do a bunch of extra testing. I'm going to pop it off again because there is a little bit more soldering that we need to do. So you've got one connector to your screen, and that's where she's going to go. Now, I left this together. Now, this is the PSP speaker. Now, when you get it, there's actually some like little metal springs there at the bottom that I guess are made to probably make it sit properly in the PSP. You can snap those off, and you just leave a tiny little bit of metal at both ends because you're going to need a spot to add your solder, because you need to actually create a solid connection. Now, the next thing, after you've actually added your solder to both of these, like both the left and the right point there, now when you take a look at this faceplate, so it seems to be like there's a specific shape there. There's actually a spot that's pretty much exactly made to those dimensions to fit that speaker, and it sounds pretty great. With the A plus B, like putting the left and the right audio together, it turns out pretty nicely. I was a little skeptical at the start, but once I did the left and right conjoining, all of a sudden the sound had jumped like, I would say at least another 50% from what it was. So we've got another solder point that we need to do here. Now, the cool part is that this is already to a solder point that we're familiar with already. So we're actually going to be soldering it to the SPL0, so we only need to solder it to one point. There's already a fair bit of solder on that spot. So I am going to just very carefully tweezers are probably going to be the most accurate. You just want to be sure not to bridge any. Okay, so I accidentally popped that one off. So I left a little bit of slack on that wire, which is honestly just fine, because whenever you try to take it too tight, you always end up regretting it. So now the next thing I'm going to do is actually put this screen in. Now just a note, actually, before I do that, I covered the back of this with Kapton tape because this entire thing is metal and it's exposed. So as anybody who's done any mods would tell you, that's really usually generally a bad combination. So yeah, put some Kapton tape or something on the back there to keep it from making contact on whatever could happen to be there, especially because you're soldering some connections pretty close to the screen there. There we go. Okay. That is not a solid connection. Use the tweezers, that's what they're for. There we go. Okay. Wow, that thing's being stubborn. There we go. So, we've got a solid ribbon connection. Now, I put a little piece of double-sided tape on the back of the speaker, just on the, like the very back where the magnet is, so I could keep this thing roughly in the spot that it needs to be. So, far enough over that you're actually sort of like, yeah, I think you get the picture. So that's going to be about the placement that we've got, right? That's what we're looking for. Now the other piece here is a bit of a thing, because the other end needs to go to the ground. So the ground is over the back and up and around, and the ground point is right on the headphone jack right here. You can see that little shiny bit. So I'm going to be soldering this thing down and then sealing it in with a piece of Kapton tape as well, keeping that wire roughly where it needs to go. Okay. So, I think this would be a good time to talk again about the wisdom of continuously soldering or desoldering points. Usually not a good idea once you've got a good connection to mess with it. So, use a little bit of Kapton tape and keep that wire in the general vicinity that it needs to be. And you can actually bring it around the cartridge area here and tuck it in nicely. It looks like just the right amount of slack. Okay, turn it back over, and now we've got pretty much a completed package here. So we're going to set that aside for a second, and we're going to put together the faceplate. The D-pad is pretty simple. That's not going to be a lot of extra science here. The one that's a little tricky because of the size of the buttons is going to be, yeah, the ABXYs. And they all go in a very particular fashion. So I honestly try not to take them out too much. So I actually left the start and select sort of attached here. So we've got A, yeah, B. I highly recommend tweezers. If I used my big sausage fingers, it wouldn't really go all that well for me. Yeah, it still doesn't. Okay, and then we've got our X and our Y. Okay, so once you get this on, just try not to let those buttons go astray. Okay, that's kind of it for the front shell. That's why this is easy. So we're going to want to make sure the screen is clean. I actually applied a screen protector to this one. And then I used a bit of very light foam tape without taking off the, without exposing the adhesive. So this would actually fit a little bit nicer. But that's very much a question of, you know, what you want to do. Good. Doesn't seem like the wire is actually causing any fitment issues. I'm going to pan back a little bit here. Okay, so you can see it's generally all in good shape. The only thing I might adjust a little bit, the screen's slightly off, and so is that speaker. So I'm probably just going to pull on that wire just a little bit more. Speaker's a little too high, and that should do the job. Nope, still not right. Just about. Pretty much perfect. Awesome. So now is when we're going to want to actually get some some screws in there to hold that in place where we need it to. No, I haven't actually adjusted the screen yet. If I leave it as it is, it would be a little bit crooked, but I can do that after. Yeah, that looks like it's going to be good. It's exactly the right placement for that speaker. That moment when you realize you're using the wrong size screw. Need the shallow ones. Okay, so we've got all of our buttons in. Now, as I said, whatever you do, don't tip this thing over, because you're going to hate yourself if you have to put these buttons, the triggers, back together. Now, a couple other things. The volume needs to be at the very top, because then you can actually just make sure that you've actually got the volume all the way up here, and make sure that they're in the same position when you set it down. And the power needs to be at the very bottom. So just make sure that when you're putting it in, you don't have any resistance from either of those points, because those are not buttons that you want to snap off. There we go. It's all fitting together quite nicely. Now there is one thing I forgot to do though, so before we go ahead, just pop that back off again. That's easy enough. Need to make sure that the screen is flush at the very bottom. It tends to be a little bit crooked if you don't make sure that it is right at the bottom there. So I made sure that the screen isn't going to be crooked. That's good. And now, yeah, let's go back to doing what we do. So volume all the way up to the top, and power at the bottom. There, looks like the volume and power synced up perfectly. First try. And now we're going to put the rest of this back together. This is the Easy Flash Omega Definitive Edition. It works beautifully in here. I've been playing on this one all week. This thing is so small and light compared to a GBA, and that's the thing. I love my GBAs, but when it comes down to it, screen-wise, it's pretty close in terms of what you can get to use. And then, but yeah, you just look like how much of a difference in bulk and weight it is in particular, because you're just using a rechargeable battery instead of AA's or a lithium polymer one. So yes, I love my GBAs, but this is a really, really fun addition to the library. I'm really, really happy that I did this. And so, once again, giving a shout out to Chris at Retro Gamer Store. Thanks a lot for the prototype. I'm looking forward to checking out, maybe buying a couple more of these for future builds. But here we go. Just go to recently played. Okay, team. That's been another Primetime Funk mod. Thanks again to Chris at Retro Gamer Store, and I hope he does well with the line. It's a worthy product, so awesome. Until next time.